IVT's Computer Systems Validation and Software Assurance Week is back and better than ever. The acclaimed source for delivering regulatory updates, evaluating novel system integration methodologies, and discovering the latest in digital innovations, CSV Week 2021 delivers a 3-day virtual conference experience. Backed by 2 decades of industry insights and educational training, this is the most recognized event for CSV professionals to navigate the digital transformation, realize excellence in next-generation approaches to quality systems, share lessons from the field, and strategize on industry best practices. Hear from top pharma and biotech executives, gain exclusive insights from FDA speakers, and be part of the CSA and digital transformation discussions while leveraging unlimited network opportunities with colleagues and key decision makers. Plus, our all-new digital badging and GMP credit system is now available. You won't want to miss it. For all the information, visit www.informaconnect.com/CSV for all details on agenda, registration, and special group rates for teams.
This is Voices in Validation, brought to you by IVT Network. IVT Network is your expert source for life science regulatory knowledge. Voices in Validation brings you the best in validation and compliance topics. We interview industry experts from pharma, biotech, med devices, and laboratories. Here is the host of Voices in Validation, Stacey.
Welcome back to another episode of Voices in Validation, brought to you by the IVT Network. We're glad to have you here with us again this week. Far too often, we hear of unanticipated illness and even death due to unexpected effects of ingredients in the foods or medicines we consume. Sometimes these are deliberate, with people consuming more than prescribed, or perhaps even mixing medications. We might think people should know better, but sometimes these are unintentional with catastrophic impacts, such as the case of the black licorice. The IVT Network recently published a blog post, Unexpected Toxicity from Drug Products, on this very topic. So today we'll discuss this case and many more as we discover the associated science with 2 of the authors, Bernard Hsu and Paul Pluta. Welcome, guys. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
So, Paul, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about the background on the development of this topic and, of course, the corresponding blog discussion.
Thank you. Well, the idea for the blog was originated from the licorice story. And here we had this poor guy who was eating licorice, natural licorice, and he died. The story got a lot of visibility in Chicago area and television visibility. And the poor guy was eating candy and all of a sudden dropped off. So what a sad event. And as we talked about this with some of my colleagues, it seemed like no one knew about this potential in licorice. And as I started looking in literature, there's quite a lot written about it. In fact, FDA has even published a paper on it, which said, don't eat more than a couple of ounces of licorice per day. So it is pretty well known. But this incident reminded us of several other situations, let's call them, in pharmaceutical processing and pharmaceutical industry and drug products. And so our idea was, let's try to get some awareness of these incidents and try to help people be aware of the serious problems which can occur.
Yeah, I agree. When I first heard about this case, Paul, I was shocked and startled, honestly, by the toxicity of black licorice. And Bernard, we did tease out the licorice case in our lead because it is such a surprising story. And I'm going to ask you to tell us about the event involving black licorice and the science behind it, like what really happened here.
Yeah, definitely. So this was the primary source for the case was actually a report in the New England Journal of Medicine in around September of 2020. And in it, they talked about a 54-year-old construction worker local to Boston who had come in with end organ damage that came out from cardiac arrest. And so they actually didn't know what specifically was the cause of it, but what they found in his blood was that he had low potassium presence in blood. And so they wanted to figure out and connect what was happening. And it was when they discovered that he was eating what he thought was like almost Twizzler kind of licorice candy, it actually turned out to be real licorice.
Oh.
So the difference that we have here is that the big name candy products, even though they're called licorice, they're not the actual like licorice root extract derived candy. And so because of that, you can eat 2 bags, 3 bags, 5 bags of Twizzlers. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could.
You got a whole lot of sugar there.
And you wouldn't quite necessarily have the same reaction as this person did. And so I did a little bit more investigating, and I didn't say this in the video that I published on this case, but what I found out was that the working class community in Boston, they have a wide variety of grocery stores that they can go to.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I found out was that there's a series of ethnic grocery stores that get some of their foods or goods imported. And I don't know if they're not necessarily checked or something's happening in the background there. But what this person ended up doing was he bought this candy thinking it was candy, and it probably was branded as just candy, but it actually had licorice root extract in it. And that's the thing with pharmacological activity. And so what's in that licorice root is a little bit of an analog to a hormone that comes out of the kidneys. And what that hormone does, if there's too much of it, is causes the kidneys to start putting potassium into the urine. And then it's enough where he would have needed like 10 ultra concentrated vials of potassium just to replenish it, because he had been eating so much of the candy for so many days it had been gathering in his body.
Right.
And so when that hormone was able to finally push out a large majority of the potassium, it caused a lot of his muscles to start to break down. And because the heart is a muscle, the heart started to break down. He went into a rest, and they didn't get him quick enough. They didn't resuscitate him quick enough. And so that was then where the end organ damage and ultimately the patient passed.
I mean, it's heartbreaking, but it's also so unbelievable because, so many people think they're doing a good thing when they are choosing the all natural products or the products with the, herbs and other natural supplements in them. And this is obviously a case where that definitely was not the case. Paul, in the blog, you discussed gummy pharmaceutical products. As a mom, I know how easy it is to get kids to take medicine in this form, as it seems like candy. Tell us about this type of product and why there is such potential for problems here.
Well, gummies are a relatively new phenomenon. In industry, when I worked in industry, we did the best we could to make elegant products. We had tablets that were nicely coated and shiny and very appealing. And then we would do children's vitamins, and they would be chewables. And, we used to have Bugs Bunny vitamins and Flintstone vitamins.
Yeah.
Well, the current generation now is gummies.
Yeah.
And gummies are really quite easy to make. I mean, you could make gummies in your own kitchen with some Jell-O and some Knox gelatin, some unflavored gelatin. All it is a highly solidified gelatin base. And so drug companies, being what they are, would like to have new products. So they have developed gummy vitamins, gummy laxatives, gummy fibers, gummy sleeping pills, gummy apple cider vinegar. You can get everything in gummies. Now, for children, very useful because kids don't like to swallow meds, and meds are bitter. And certainly also for pets, dogs don't eat tablets, but put a chewable, beef-flavored chewable around a med, the dogs will swallow it down. So there are very good uses, but they are dangerous if taken too much, if overdosed. And so, you parents have to be very careful to not let the kids have access to the vitamins because the entire box. And, as I looked into some YouTube videos and some Google sources, and I read the comments, there would be all these comments from adults saying, "Oh my God, I just ate a whole bottle of gummies, of vitamin gummies. And, you know, what's going to happen to me? And they think of the gummies as being so good tasting, which they are. They just eat them like candy. But the truth is, you could have an overdose from mostly fat-soluble vitamins A and D. There's a chance for vitamin K also, some B vitamins you could get toxicity from. But in any case, the key is to be aware that you're taking a medicine, and don't overdose, and don't think it's candy, because it's got, you know, potency to it. And, you know,
Sure. I mean,
think of
and
a
it's not,
gummy as a drug.
yeah, no, definitely. And it's not just the gummies, Paul. I mean, there's, you know, chocolate bar, chocolate flavored candy, like we see that a lot with laxatives and, you know, brownies. And we're starting to see a lot of, with cannabis, you know, being legalized in many places, we're starting to see a lot of food type products that are carrying medicines. So, I mean, what do you think about this problem in terms of how widespread it is now and where we're headed?
Well, you have to be aware that medicine is medicine, and it's not candy. And certainly protect children from it, protect pets from it, but don't, you know, I don't understand why an adult would need a gummy laxative, you know? I mean, you don't need it. But unfortunately, you know, consumer focus and different dosage forms and so forth wins out in the end. But it's really just being aware of the dangers.
Of course. Bernard, do you have anything to add to that, to the, you know, the presentation as candy or edibles?
Yeah, there's a lot of internet jokes about this, and you know, I think I've in part helped field some of it myself through some of the videos that I've posted and some of the things that I've tweeted about gummy vitamins. And so there was a couple weeks ago, I remember seeing a thread on Twitter about gummy birth control.
Ooh.
And I was thinking, if we can't even handle vitamins, gummy birth control would be brutal, right? It would just be like the moment you accidentally take 2 or 3 of them, you might start to have some issues. And so like once you start putting hormones in there, I mean, you could make the argument that some of the fat soluble vitamins are hormone-like. And so, you know, those are vitamins. So there's a relatively wide index where, you know, you could have therapeutic effect and then toxicity. And because it's wide, it's not as big a problem as something like gummy birth control would be. And so with that kind of formulation, I guess the good thing is that it would encourage people to take their doses on time at the cost of potentially taking second or third or fourth or maybe 10 doses.
Right. And I think that's the important part to remember here, is that despite the, you know, the delivery vehicle being candy-like, they are still medicines, and we have to treat them like any other, you know, over-the-counter or prescription medication that we might take. And that seems to be where there's the biggest disconnect at this point, I think. And speaking of toxicity, I mean, it's not just the gummies or the candy-like products where we see issues arise. Most Americans have taken pain relievers for typical aches and pains, as well as for fever. And the blog discussed specific dangers around acetaminophen, which of course is Tylenol products and others. Bernard, tell us about the problems associated with the drug acetaminophen.
Yeah, so one of the primary issues with acetaminophen or Tylenol, or if you're in Europe, paracetamol, the primary issue is that it just happens to be in so many other over-the-counter medicines. So if in case you're taking a prescription medicine that has acetaminophen in it, and then you're taking an additional over-the-counter medicine, you're taking a double dose of it. Sure. And so the problem with that is that it adds up pretty quickly, because when it comes to acetaminophen, you're talking 500 milligrams in one tablet. Well, if you're taking 2 tablets, that's 1 gram. And if you're doing that 3 times a day, that's 3 grams. So 3,000 milligrams, which is right at the upper limit of what the FDA is recommending daily in terms of intake. And so the thing with Tylenol overdose is that it's harder to tell when it's happening, if especially you're taking over-the-counter medicines, multiple of them with prescription medicines that also happen to have Tylenol. and it's adding up together. And let's just say you've accidentally taken 8 grams of Tylenol, you're not going to immediately recognize that you've taken that. And then, the pain is going to start to happen. The overdose effects are going to start to happen. And a lot of that happens first biochemically in the body, but then manifests as clinical symptoms. And so the danger in that is just because of how prevalent acetaminophen is in all of these different medicines that are taken for very common ailments. You get your wisdom teeth pulled, you're going to get Tylenol, and Vicodin has 325, or the Norco. It used to be Vicodin, but now it's Norco, which has less Tylenol in it, but still has Tylenol in it. And then, other people will then add in to other over-the-counter medicines, and it adds up very quickly, and it's become a big problem probably in the last 15 years.
Sure. Yeah, I know. And we see, Tylenol or acetaminophen as a primary ingredient in some cold medicines or allergy medicines too. So, I mean, I can see where this could be a problem if you're taking multiple things. You take your allergy medicine in the morning or cold medicine in the morning, and perhaps, later on you have a headache and you're popping a couple more pills. It could quickly add up, and you're not really even aware of it. So that can be certainly scary. In recent years, we have seen a trend in the popularity of herbal supplements as well, from vitamins to teas. And the assumption is that because they come from natural ingredients, they're completely safe. Paul, we know this is not the case, and you guys touched on this as well in the blog. Can you tell us about safety concerns with herbals?
It goes back to the same thinking. You need to be aware of what you're taking and appreciate that they are drugs and they contain active ingredients. You mentioned that because they're not prescribed and they're not approved by FDA and they're over-the-counter aisle, available, people don't think of them as drugs. And yet, once they start being on them, and especially if they don't take them on a regular basis, you could get all kinds of problems. Now, for example, the main problem we want to talk about is the bleeding problem. And a lot of herbals have a anti-clotting effect. In other words, ginseng, echinacea, St. John's wort, ginkgo, all have effects on blood clotting. And also prescription drugs the same way. So it's really important if you're on Coumadin, which is a anticoagulant drug,
right?
Tell your doctor, I also take this, this, and this, and this. And then what happens is your dosage of Coumadin is titrated against your blood clotting, blood test called a INR. And what happens is people start taking, let's say, St. John's wort, and then they go into the clinic and all of a sudden their INR value is way, way too high, meaning that they would have a risk of bleeding. And, I had a couple of personal incidents with these things. I happened to be at a family party, and the guest of honor got a nosebleed and couldn't stop the bleeding. And of course, she was on Coumadin, so her blood was already compromised a bit, but probably the anxiety and all that couldn't stop the nosebleed. So paramedics had to come in and treat her. And I asked the paramedics, I said, this happened? He says, oh, this happens all the time. And he says, people get bruises when they'll bump their elbow, and all of a sudden they get a bruise. And, you shouldn't get a bruise from just bumping your elbow, a gentle bump.
Right.
People will be shaving and they'll get bleeding from a cut from shaving. And so that's an indication that your blood clotting is not at the same, at where it should be. So anyway, a big problem. Again, people being unaware of the problem. And yet it happens a lot and happens frequently, and you could have pretty serious effects.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we know that the FDA, as you mentioned, is not regulating herbals, herbal supplements, or any kind of herbal teas, any kind of that product. But yet, obviously, they should be disclosed to your doctor. I'm going
Absolutely,
to
yes.
assume that oftentimes people forget, though, to tell their care providers about these kinds of things because in their mind, they're not medications that they're taking. So, has the FDA published any reports, or are they doing anything like requiring, packaging to include
No.
warnings about combining these, certain drugs with herbals?
Yeah, they suggest informing them of problems with herbals, and they have a mechanism to communicate things, but it isn't as rigorous as on pharmaceuticals. And one more thing I forgot to mention before, that dentists are another issue. When people go in for a cleaning,
Right.
for a minor surgical procedure, if they remember to tell the dentist will probably say, stop taking all the extra things. And sometimes they even have them go off of their Coumadin until the dental procedure is done. And then they'll restart again. But I had a neighbor who was in the middle of a dental procedure, had bleeding, dentist had to stop because the bleeding was so profuse and couldn't stop it.
Wow. Bernard, I see you shaking
It's a
your head.
serious problem.
Yeah. About the FDA warnings or lack thereof. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing with a lot of patients is that sometimes they might even not want to tell the doctor that they're taking some of the herbals because then they fear they might get into a conversation that might get combative with the doctor to say, well, I want to take the St. John's wort, right? And and they might have their various reasons for taking it, and so that's where it becomes combative, because if you're taking St. John's wort but a different medicine, and there really isn't an interaction directly with the signs and symptoms, it actually happens in the liver, and so it's just where the prescribed medicine would get broken down is interfered with by St. John's wort or something else, for example, like grapefruit juice is another big one. Those are what cause the problems. So, they also don't want to be combative. So they might just tell the doctor, or just not even say anything to begin with.
Sure.
And so that's where a lot of the issues do come in to play into the clinic.
Mm.
With other drugs, either drugs could have an enhanced effect or a depressed effect, depending on what the mechanism is. So being aware of what you're taking, and especially not, let's say, if you do take it on a regular basis. And if you be aware of it and communicate it and so forth, and don't overtake it, don't take too much, don't do anything in excess. I mean, that goes for just about everything, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. And that's going to be the moral of the story here, I think. Bernard, you have created a large number of videos. We alluded to that. We're also going to link to several of them that are related to this particular topic in our show notes. And of course, they're all based on science and breaking down some of the catastrophic events that we're talking about for the average consumer, so they can better understand what's happening inside the body and how these products are interacting with organs or other medications. But I wanted to ask you, what have you learned about people's attitudes and assumptions when it comes to medications or chemicals in products through these videos and your research?
In general, I don't see too much negative opinion about the medicines. Where I see kind of two different sides is that in the videos, I try to make it obvious that there was some kind of excess that occurred.
Yeah.
But some people don't see that excess. And so in turn, you have two different sides of one that, loves using the phrase, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But then on the flip side, there's another side that says, well, Bernard's videos make me afraid of everything. And so, you see a dichotomy that's in here, but the reality is that, if you're eating a whole bottle of gummy vitamins, there's probably an issue there. If you accidentally eat, 3 or 4 in a day, you're probably going to be fine.
Right.
If you eat 150 for breakfast and you do it, 5 days a week,
Yeah.
there's probably going to be a problem, right?
Right.
And so, then where I guess the third rung on this ladder, so to say, would be the people who buy licorice candy at the ethnic grocer and don't realize that it's the real deal that has the actual licorice root extract. Then in that case, you have somebody who's unaware of their excess, who's then getting in trouble somewhere later down the line. And so I guess if you look at that third part, both of the other sides are justified, because then one, yes, there is excess, because if all you're eating is that licorice candy, it's like, well, you shouldn't have been eating just candy for, several days in a row. But then on the other hand, people that get scared of things, because you don't know, in something like that, you think you're eating candy, and you genuinely think you're eating candy, not anything else. And so in that case, then you would be scared.
Yeah, and to be honest, like personally, before I read this case study several months back and your blog post on it, even if I read, made with natural licorice extract or licorice root extract, I did not know that could be toxic. Now, I mean, and so to your point, like, ooh, people can go, oh my God, there could be, anything could be dangerous. We hear people taking cinnamon supplements or garlic supplements. Like, are there, issues around that? But again, the bottom line is you have to take a lot, like a huge amount of any of these products to really have these sorts of, catastrophic events happen.
Yeah, exactly. And like for me in the videos, I try to make it obvious, like that there was some kind of excess happening. And I think in the case of the licorice, they had to find through a history that he actually consumed licorice, right? And
Right.
Because otherwise it's just hypokalemia that they see, and hypokalemia leading to a cardiac arrest. And so like in things like my video, there was one about a guy who drank a lava lamp, right? And he was delirious.
Yeah.
And so when you're in an altered mental status, not in a position to make good judgments, and you end up accidentally drinking a lava lamp, right? To the people who are afraid of everything, I would say, well, if you say that my videos make you afraid of everything, I'd be afraid that you were considering drinking a lava lamp, right? And so, it does go both ways, but I guess there's enough videos out there now that there's some videos that are borderline, and that it's like, well, that really could have been me, right? It's like 5-day-old pasta, for example, like that definitely could have been me.
Right. For sure.
Well, some of the videos are excellent. I mean, everyone is excellent, but especially like, what about the colon cleanse one with the soy sauce, right? I mean, people do that, or the one that the lady drank 2 gallons of distilled water. Now that was like
a short period of time, right?
Contest thing or whatever, but it messed up the electrolytes in the heart. So there's some really practical things that could happen, and especially acetaminophen. To me, that's really the unknown killer, because you've got Tylenol PM that has a gram or so, or I'm not sure it's Tylenol, one of those OTC sleepers have a gram of Tylenol, and you might take that when you've been dosing yourself all day long for cold and flu.
Absolutely.
You absolutely exceed the recommended dose.
Right. And so, as we mentioned, the moral of this story here is everything in moderation, right? And be careful, know what you're taking, even if you don't suspect that it is, harmful medication. Just make sure that you are not overdoing it with any of these. As we get ready to close out this episode, I want to give each of you a chance to share any takeaways or any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our listeners with on this topic. And Paul, we'll start with you.
I would recommend Bernard's videos, and what it does is it makes you aware of things.
Yeah.
And people learn by listening, people learn by seeing, people learn by doing, and so it's just another mechanism to learn some important things. And so they're really good, but they're, I'll tell you something. You had the video on the boy who ate the pasta that was left outside his refrigerator. And we talked about that last time with the bacillus toxin that was produced.
Mhm.
And I do a much better job of refrigerating old food quickly.
Yeah, of course, for sure, for sure.
So anyway, I think it really helps with awareness of things.
Bernard, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so I got a bunch of emails recently. So the last video that I made was about fat loss chemical. It's not even really a supplement because it's been banned by the FDA for human consumption. And so in that story, the patient was found in the shower by his brother-in-law on the floor with like the cold water running all over him, because that supplement or that chemical makes the body just release copious amounts of heat as part of like burning fat. And so he didn't realize that something was wrong. His brother-in-law didn't realize something was wrong. He even asked his brother-in-law to bring him a Coca-Cola and a Steak and Shake milkshake. And so this brother-in-law actually went out to get it and then came back and found this guy unconscious in the shower again. And so it's like, it's not immediately apparent that somebody could be in a life-threatening situation. And so a lot of times it takes kind of a little bit of foresight to realize that, hey, something terrible is happening right now. And if we wait an extra 30 minutes to an hour, like it might be unsalvageable, this entire situation.
Yeah.
Right? It might be impossible to bring this person back from the brink. And so, like after I released that video, I got a lot of emails saying that, these people had some situations where, they were kind of like knocked out on the floor in the bathroom and didn't realize that something terrible was happening. And it just so happened that they had family or somebody in their household was able to call for an ambulance and bring them in. And sometimes the fix, at least on the medical side, is easy, give an IV push of potassium or something. And in that case, it'd be okay. But sometimes it's not so straightforward. And so, and it's not so immediately obvious that somebody is in a life-threatening situation at that point in time. So, for me, I always try to be conscious of what's going in, right? And just to make sure, because I at the very least, I'm risk adverse, so I don't want to put myself in a situation like that. So it's like, just be careful if I happen to be eating a lot of candy, just make sure I'm not reaching out of the vitamin bottle for that candy, right?
Right. Yeah, pay attention to your surroundings, right? And then try not to overdo it on any one product or item, whether it's health food, candy, supplements, or regular food. Honestly, I mean, it's too much of a good thing can sometimes have negative effects, as we've seen.
And looking up what you're considering taking is a great idea. In the case of the dinitrophenol, so that's illegal in the States, right? But certainly people use it, and bodybuilders use it, and fat burners use it. But at least if you'd say, okay, I'm going to use it, I'll get it somehow, but look it up and see what are the possible side effects and the possible negative consequences of taking it. That's, don't ever put something in your mouth that you don't know at least a little bit about.
Yeah, that's a great point, Paul. That's another really great point. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you, Bernard and Paul, for sharing your fascinating research with us. This certainly is food for thought.
Very nice.
I also want to give a big shout out to our producer, Ben Kitchen. And most importantly, a big thanks to you, our valued listeners. If you have topic requests or guest suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. You can message us through LinkedIn or through our website. If you enjoyed this episode, head on over to your podcast player of choice and subscribe, and be sure to share with your friends, colleagues, and online networks. For today's show notes, including links to some of Bernard's very informative videos, and for more information on this podcast, please visit www.ivtnetwork.com. We'll be back again next week with another great interview. Until then, make it a great week.